What's the point of telling a story if you can't share it with others? Lumafusion, the new art of editing.
What's up, guys? I got a brand new video for you today, and if you are a tech nerd or love tech, love computers and stuff like that, this video is for you. If you aren't into that kind of thing, well, you can maybe watch it or watch something else. But I generally like to upgrade my computer once a year, and I did a video last year. You can check the link up here when I upgraded my workstation to a Ryzen 1700X, so that's AMD platform, and it's been awesome. It's been working really well, but I just found out that Adobe came out with an update recently that actually allows something like Quick Sync in Final Cut Pro, and basically what that does is it uses integrated graphics to accelerate the encoding and exporting of files. So Premiere now has that, but the Ryzen 1700X doesn't have built-in graphics. So that means I'd be looking at upgrading to something like an Intel system, so an Intel Core i7, and we're up to the 8th generation now. So I looked into those CPUs, and the fastest right now that has integrated graphics would be the 8700K, which is a 6-core 12-thread CPU. But they also just came out with an anniversary edition 8086K, which is the exact same CPU. It's just binned, and it clocks a little bit faster. So right out of the box, it'll turbo up to 5 gigahertz. So I decided to bite the bullet and put my money into that. So let's build this thing. Okay, enough with the sexy B-roll. I know that the RTX 2080 and the RTX 2080 Ti were just announced by NVIDIA, but I'm not going to upgrade my old 1080 Ti because it's still powerful enough for what I want. But let's talk about Quick Sync or hardware encoding in Premiere. I was actually a bit skeptical when I ran some of the tests at first because I didn't really notice any difference, but then I actually realized I had to check on hardware encoding inside of the Premiere export, and I didn't have that option right off the bat. So I went into the BIOS and enabled integrated graphics because that wasn't turned on. Went back to Premiere, still same thing, no hardware encoding option. So then I realized that I probably needed to install a driver from Intel, which I did, and then I was able to enable hardware encoding. And once I had that option, my mind was blown. I also need to bring up the fact that I do have the 8086K, which means I can clock this thing way higher. And I did overclock it to 5.2 gigahertz, so all my tests are at 5.2 gigahertz. I was actually able to get the CPU up to 5.3 gigahertz, but the temperatures were a little bit too high for what I wanted. Instead, I have to settle for 5.2 gigahertz. I know. Alright, so I'm going to jump into Premiere now and show you some tests. I did these tests with the old Ryzen 1700X, and that was clocked at 3.8 gigahertz because that was where I found the best overclock and, you know, wasn't crashing and stuff like that. So let's take a look at a 3-minute C200 raw clip. These are just some clips out of a music video that I was shooting. This is not the actual video. This is just a bunch of clips thrown in with a quick grade thrown on top of it just to see what it's like to export this. So the video is 3 minutes exactly, and it took 10 minutes right on the dot to export that. Alright, so the next test was just a 4K MP4 project. It was 7 minutes and 20 seconds. I had some grading on it, a bunch of edits and stuff like that. You've probably already seen the video, but I exported that and it took 10 minutes and 25 seconds. And then next I wanted to do a warp stabilizing test. So on a 10-second clip, it took 2 minutes and 13 seconds to warp stabilize that clip. Alright, so those are the old numbers. Let's take a look at the new numbers with the 8086K clocked at 5.2 gigahertz. So that 3-minute raw export from the C200 was 5 minutes and 17 seconds. So literally half the time. So it was twice as fast. Let's take a look at the 7 minutes and 20 second MP4 4K project. That was 7 minutes and 47 seconds to export, which wasn't twice as fast, but it was still a lot faster. And if I look at the CPU usage, I noticed that when I was doing the C200 export, it was using 100% CPU usage. But when I was exporting the MP4 4K project, I wasn't using as much CPU usage, but it was actually starting to use more of the integrated graphics. So I could tell that it was actually using that Quick Sync technology to export. Then I did the same 10-second warp stabilizer, and we got 1 minute and 40 seconds. So again, wow, that wasn't quite twice as fast, but still way faster. Taking a look at timeline performance, I didn't really notice any difference between the Ryzen 1700X and the 8086K. They seem to perform pretty much exactly the same. It was more just down to the exporting time, and applying effects and stuff like that was a lot quicker to render out with the 8086K. So basically with those results, we can see that Quick Sync is actually doing its job and it's working really fast. I was not expecting those type of results. I was expecting, like some small gains, but not like double the gains. So it's actually really awesome that Adobe's starting to add some of the things that Final Cut can do. It's still way slower. If I had Final Cut running these projects, it would export probably twice as fast again. Anyway, for the tech nerds, let's take a look at the benchmarks. Alright, so the Ryzen 1700X at 3.8 gigahertz running the Cinebench test. We got a CPU score of 1643 CB with an FPS of 112.99. For the Geekbench score on single core, we got 4,379, and for multi-core, we got 25,668. With the 8086K overclocked to 5.2 gigahertz in Cinebench, we got a score of 1662, which is almost identical to the Ryzen 1700X. Even though it's missing 2 cores, 4 threads, I guess the clock speed makes up for it. And the FPS was 182.66, which is way faster than the Ryzen 1700X, which doesn't make any sense because it's the same video card, 1080 Ti, which makes you almost wonder if the CPU was a bottleneck. And it's kind of weird because the 1700X shouldn't bottleneck a 1080 Ti, but these are the results I got, and it's way faster. Taking a look at Geekbench, this is where my head kind of exploded. Single core score, 6,646, with a multi-core score of 30,679. So much faster on both single core and multi-core. And it's kind of a given that the single core will be that much faster because of the speed. The clock speeds are 5.2 gigahertz. And yeah, those are the benchmarks. You can clearly see how much faster the CPU is with the higher clock speeds. And this is where the video gets interesting because since I'm running Intel now, I thought that I could probably Hackintosh this thing. I've done a few Hackintoshes in the past, like 3 or 4, and I ran like a couple of them like daily every day for like years on end, and they're really solid. I got a buddy that actually bought my old one, put it in his studio, and he's still using it like 4 years later. So I know that it can be stable, so I decided to try it out because I kind of miss Mac OS. I've been working off Windows for a while now, and I decided to try it out, and let's take a look at the results. So I used one of my old M.2 drives to use as a Mac boot drive, and I went onto my MacBook and made the USB boot drive for High Sierra. If you want to figure out how to do it, you can go to TonyMacX86.com. There's so much information on there. That's how I figured out how to do everything. And I ran into a few snags. I had a few problems getting it to boot up, but when I finally did get it to boot up, it took me only a couple hours, and I had macOS installed on the computer, and everything was pretty much running pretty well. It still took me almost 2 days to like iron out all the issues and get everything to work perfectly. And right now it's running behind me, and I'm like really impressed with it. It's running super smooth right now without any issues. So I decided to run these exact same tests in macOS on Premiere, except for the C200 raw test because I deleted the files, but I can assume that it would run basically the same or a little bit faster, and I'll show you why I think a little bit faster in a second. So the Hackintosh is still running at 5.2 gigahertz, and going into Premiere with that same 7-minute and 20-second MP4 file, I did an export with QuickSync enabled. I had to do some stuff in the Hackintosh end to get that to work, but I did get it to work because we exported at 6 minutes and 41 seconds, which is almost a whole minute faster than on Windows with the exact same setup. So that's insane. Then I did the 10-second warp stabilizer test. It took 1 minute and 27 seconds, which was only about 14 seconds faster, but it was still faster. So as you can see where I'm going here, macOS seems to be a little bit more optimized for Premiere on this hardware, which is something you don't usually say, because Premiere has never been optimized for Mac. Anyway, let's take a look at some benchmarks. Again, 5.2 gigahertz in Cinebench. I got a score of 1712 CB, which is much higher than the 1626 CB I got from Windows. And then looking at the FPS, I got 157.7 FPS. So it's kind of expected that the FPS would be a little bit lower because NVIDIA GPUs don't really work as well on Mac OS. But I was still impressed with the score on the CPU. That was way higher than I expected. And then going into Geekbench, I got a single core score of 6,994 with a multi-core score of 32,873. Again, those numbers are much higher than Windows, and that's insane. So that's probably why it's running a little bit faster. I have no idea why it's running faster. It's again running at 5.2 gigahertz. Nothing's changed as far as the hardware end, just Mac OS. So all that said, my experience with macOS is amazing. It's running smooth, it's fast, all the Adobe apps are working properly like they should, and I just thought I'd share this experience with you guys because I haven't really made a video on Hackintoshing. And if you want to know more about making a Hackintosh, don't start spamming me with messages in my inbox because everyone's hardware is so different that it doesn't work the same way all the time. But if you're planning on making a Hackintosh and you want a system that works well, you can pretty much buy the exact same hardware as me, and I can share my EFI Clover file with you guys, my plist file, and the kex that I used, and then you can basically get the same kind of setup as me if you want a Hackintosh. I know there's some more beefy CPUs on the X299 platform, so the Intel, there's like 10 core, 8 core, 12 core, stuff like that, but I just decided to go with the 6 core to try it out, and it's working pretty well. So since I've been so stoked in using macOS, I decided why not go for the whole experience. I ended up buying the new Magic Keyboard 2 and the Magic Mouse 2 in the space gray, the stealthed out black version that comes with the iMac Pro, and I've been loving it. I like the new keys. The keys actually are kind of like the second generation of the MacBook keys, and it just looks really nice with this setup. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to know more about Hackintosh stuff, check out TonyMacX86.com if you want to figure out how to do that. If you want to pick up any of the parts that are in this video, I'll put links in the description where to get that. And yeah, hopefully I didn't bore you too much. This kind of stuff fascinates me and I love working on computers. But yeah, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you dislike this video, give it a thumbs down twice. I'll see you in the next one.
Phone or on an iPad with Lumafusion, and I just think it's a game changer for the next generation of filmmakers. On our phone or on an iPad with Lumafusion, and I just think it's a game changer for the next generation of filmmakers.
There's beauty in telling your story where you're most inspired to tell it. Lumafusion, the new art of editing.